Our next prize is the Ruane Prize, which is given for child and adolescent psychiatry. And this year's awardee is another person born outside the United States, internationally, Boris Burmeyer, who's actually from Cali, Colombia, originally. He was educated there and then came to New York at Albert Einstein, and also to Columbia, did a child psychiatry fellowship under David Schaffer and all of the legendary people there. He was also recruited by Thomas Detry to Pittsburgh and has developed an absolute extraordinary bipolar research program there. He's the principal investigator in two major international multi-center trials which have findings that have made a huge difference throughout the world. So we're really going to be very interested in what he has to say about that. And I'm trying to remember exactly what is your current position in Pittsburgh. I want to just do that. And Professor of Psychiatry, that's good enough. So, good. Well, thank you very much. And let's welcome Dr. Burmeyer and look forward to him telling us about bipolar disorder in children. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Nice, Boris, nice to see you.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you what we have been doing for 20 years. I'm going to present the tip of the iceberg of what we do in these 15 minutes. And again, thank you to the foundation, because all the work that you have been doing and helping people with mental disorders. And also thank you to the council led by Danny Pine that selected our work for this prestigious award. It's really an honor for me. Then today, these are my disclosures. And today I'm going to present mainly who is at risk for bipolar disorder. This is a painting that a mother of one of our patients did for me. And then basically, when she's manic, that's the way she sees it. She's like gold. She feels like everything, like the Wizard of the path. And then when she's depressed, she's here. And there is something, she can be also periods that she feels good, but then there's something called mix. It's like a mixture of the gold with the black, and then we call it mixed episodes, that at the same time you are depressed, but at the same time you are high of energy, agitated, super anxious. And then when, like 20 years ago or more, many parents who have this bipolar disorder, the mood swings, came to me and told us, our kids are beginning to have the same symptoms that we had when we were kids. Who we can consult? Then we were lucky that in our department, specifically Dr. David Kaffer, they were very open, and then we found a clinic for children that maybe have bipolar. It was a referral center, still we have, that we do a good assessments to see if they have bipolar disorder. It's very difficult sometimes to diagnose in kids, and during the question, if you want to know a little bit more or after, I can tell you, but we don't have time today. Now, we already know that exists, and it's around 1 to 2% if we only count something called bipolar 1. Bipolar 1 is the gold and the black. There is something called bipolar 2 that the gold is not so high. We call it like hypomania. And there is something also called like subsyndromal symptoms. It's like you have bipolar, but not all the symptoms, which is extremely important in children. Also, I think in adults, because also they suffer a lot. People with bipolar have a high risk for suicide, using drugs, problems at school, problems at work, etc. Now, this is also to show you There are many studies. There are like 10, 15 studies in the world, all of them with different investigators, different methodologies showing the same. And this is when the people are adults and you go and you ask them, how old were you when you began to have mood symptoms? And this is the largest study. And then as you can see, it's about, if you add this plus this, it's about 70%. About 70% of the people say, I begin to have mood symptoms early in my life, and actually 30% below age 13. Then it's a very early illness, and it's like one of my patients used to tell me, every time I have a depression, it's like a parenthesis in my life. Then she loses her friends, she's behind on school, she has to start all over. Then bipolar disorder, then the kids can have severe temper tantrums, but severe temper tantrums exist in almost all disorders. And even when the kids have like an ear infection or fever, or you don't buy them what they want, etc. But then in bipolar disorder can be very severe, but you don't do the diagnosis unless the children have cluster of episodes that come and go. And that's the reason you need to follow them over time, and then you need to have a lot of patience to sit down with them, ask questions to the parents, teachers, grandparents, etc., and follow them. It's not only to see them once a month, every 2 months. Now, this is a typical case that is an easy one to diagnose. It's similar to the adults, as you're going to say. I didn't do this graphic. Actually, it was the father of this kid, who is an engineer. He came spontaneously with this. And then he says 0 is okay, -10 is very depressed, +10 is very high. And then the kid came when he was here. Then at school, this child, when you are in a period of mania, everything is high in your body and your brain. Then he was high energy, sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night for many nights. And when you don't sleep for 3, 4 hours at night, and the next day you don't fall asleep, something is going on. And then he was following the girls at school, and then telling the janitor how to fix the school, the principal how to administer the school, and he was expelled because people don't understand what was going on. It took us a while to convince the school to accept him back, and he also had periods of depression, again mania, and then this kid was treated specifically with lithium, and he was lucky that lithium helped the highs and the lows. He's now like 35, doing very well, except when he decided to stop his medications. But he does very well. That's a typical case, easy to diagnose, I would say. The next one is more difficult. I didn't put the age. I will tell you the age in a moment. And this is a kid with typicals like attention deficit hyperactive disorder, a lot of behavior problems for years, treated with medications, treated with therapy, family therapy, like in home-based therapy. He improved, but partially, because he has recurrent periods of depression that last only 1 week. But while he's depressed, he doesn't function. Even playing video games, he doesn't. And when you have a kid who doesn't want to play video games, you begin to worry. Grown-ups do, by the way. And then he was sleeping too much, going to school, ideas of hurting himself, like ideas that come in his mind and voices telling that he was very bad and he needed to die. But on top of this, above and beyond of all these symptoms, he has periods of only few days. That's the reason it was difficult to diagnose. Very silly. Talkative, intrusive, aggressive, hypersexual, touching the sisters, touching the kids at school, less need for sleep, 4 or 5 hours sleep for nights and nights, ideas of saving the world. And when you ask him about this, he really believed that he was Superman and he will save the world, and constantly writing notes. His mind is working very fast, as you can see. like Texas, Portugal, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Africa, a lot of ideas here. Some of the ideas, by the way, can be good when people are in mania. Excellent, they can be very intuitive, good, but the problem is that you have so much energy that you can get disorganized. And then look at this, hours and hours of writing this, and this is what we call flight of ideas. Then this kid, because he has also attention deficit disorder, behavior problems, and those mood swings, it was very difficult to diagnose. Now, this kid, when we saw, he was 9. And many people don't believe that kids can have bipolar, then they diagnose them. Then this kid also got the appropriate treatment, and he has been doing well since. Now, we decided to follow these kids. This is a study that we did together with Brown University and also UCLA. We recruit over several years like 430 kids who already have the disorder. And we follow them, and as you can see over time, 40% of the time they're euthymic. Euthymic means that the mood is normal. And 40% they have some symptoms, and 20% they have the full disorder. If you add 40 and 20, 60%. Then imagine in the life of a kid, 60% of the time they have symptoms. If I get sick at my age, it's bad. It's bad for my family, it's bad for my work, etc. But if I get sick at age 10, I'm beginning to develop. Then I don't have enough time to develop social skills, coping skills, etc. Then that's the reason it's so important to recognize and treat these kids very quickly. Because most of the adults, as I show you, who have bipolar disorder is starting their illness very early in life. Now, we were lucky that there is another study in adults for almost 25 years, and the methodology that we use in our study is very similar to the adults. And red are the children and adolescents with bipolar 1 and 2, and adults are in blue. And in the circle here is the main difference. As you can see, kids and children and adults don't have many difference in the episode of mania, depression, subsyndromal symptoms. The main difference are mixed and rapid cycling. Then this is what I told you, that is even more difficult to diagnose and actually treat. Even adults who with mixed episodes are difficult to treat, and children have more episodes. Now, is this new? It's not new. Look at this. Look at this, is Kreplin, 1921, in dark, and the dark here is depression, mixed are here in gray, and manic are black, white. If you can see, most of the people below age 25 have mixed episodes. Then we didn't discover the wheel if we are only reproducing what other people have found for years. Now, these kids, unfortunately, when they came to the study, at intake, when they came, and the average age at intake was 12, already almost 40% have suicidal ideation and attempts, and actually here is like 15% were severe suicidal attempts. When we follow them over time, we have been following for 20 years with a retention of almost 80%. These 50% already have suicidal attempts. Then it means that we have some period of time to be able to do some prevention. Also with substance abuse a lot. When they came to the study, 16%, but over follow-up, 32% began to use one or two more substances, meaning like almost 50% again develop substance abuse. And as you know, when you have bipolar plus substance abuse, the treatment is more difficult, and there are more problems in their functioning in the family and also in the family and the community. Now, because all the problems that we see with these kids, we think prevention is so important. Can we do something for prevention of kids who are going to be at risk to develop bipolar disorder? But you have to define what's prevention. Then in order to do this, we recruited a group of parents with bipolar disorder 1 and 2, and we have controls. The controls were in the community selected at random. And the controls couldn't have bipolar, of course, but also no bipolar in the first and second degree relatives. And we studied their children, and the children were from 6 to 18 years old, and that's what I'm going to present now. But over the study, parents came to us and told us, come on, you're missing an opportunity. We also have kids who are 2, 3, 4, 5, who are beginning to have problems. Then we did another study and recruit like a large sample of kids, 2 to 5, but I'm not going to present this data today. Then we are following this sample also for 20 years. These children are beginning to have their own children. We call it our grandchildren. And then we are beginning to study them. Then to summarize, in green are the children of the controls in the community. And they develop bipolar like is around 2%, 1 to 2%, which is more or less what you see in all these community studies. But look at the children of the parents with bipolar. More or less at age 10, they begin to separate. And we have been following them for 20 years, and it's around 25%, more or less, that develop bipolar disorder. Now, this is important. It means 75 have not developed bipolar disorder. Then not because you have a parent with bipolar disorder, you have bipolar disorder. But the same is with diabetes, for example. Not because you have family history of diabetes, you will develop diabetes. And it's very important because some of these kids have behavior problems. And not because they have behavior problems, they are bipolar. But we also want to identify who is all these 25%. Then we began to look in more detail which symptoms can tell you if a particular child will develop bipolar. Now, this is important, and what I'm going to show, we are going to divide the data in parents who began to have bipolar when they were older. Older, I would say, relatively older. Above, for example, age 25. And parents who began to have bipolar disorder when they were below 21, 18, 15. Why I'm doing this? Because it's a very important factor. It's one of the most important factors who increase the risk who is going to develop bipolar or not. And here is the children, no symptoms, they're healthy. Anxiety and depression only, anxiety, depression, and affective liability is mainly irritability. They get irritable very easy. And here is children with all these symptoms, but they began to have a little bit of manic symptoms that come and go. And then those are the results. No symptoms, you can begin. And the children of the parents who have early onset, you begin to have like more risk, more risk, more risk, and more risk. Here, as you see in the orange, is almost 50%. And if you see a child with these symptoms, plus early onset bipolar in the parents, the risk is almost flipping the coin. And again, these have a lot of clinical implications, both and also research implications. And clinically, yes, these kids already have depression and anxiety. How you treat them? Maybe you give them treatment for anxiety and depression with medications and you trigger the mania. And then this is something that we are looking. Now, we were very interested in all the studies that I show, including this, is for all the group that we do the analysis. Then you're seeing like average, and it's all the group. But we were interested in one kid. If, for example, Peter or Mary, the kid who entered in the clinic, in my clinic, if this particular kid has bipolar disorder. And it's very similar to what they're doing in medicine now, something called personalized medicine, that you want to see a particular person is at risk for cancer, for example. Then, in order to do this, we use, and medicine is using a lot, maybe you have seen this with your own doctors, something called risk calculator. Then let me walk you through. I am going to give, the example here is the risk to have a heart attack. Then the doctor is going to ask you your age, your sex, your race, if you have high blood pressure, the severity of the blood pressure, cholesterol, if you're a couch potato or not, how you run, you walk, diet, family history of heart problems or not. And all this information they put actually in a calculator. It's a mathematical model. It gives you like a score, and the score, it will give you your prognosis. You can, for example, given your factors, you have a risk of have a heart attack of 20% in the next 5 years, 50%, come on, do something, or it's 1%, whatever you're doing is working for you. And the same can be done, for example, for cancer. If a person have like breast cancer surgery and you want to know the risk of relapse, then you can do it. And for many illnesses, in psychiatry, it's not so much. There is some studies with risk for schizophrenia, but nothing in depression and bipolar. And then this is what I told you before. We want to know if it's specific. Then we develop a risk calculator for onset of bipolar disorder, and our risk calculator has like an accuracy of like 72%, which is very similar to heart attacks. And okay, and then we add, this is the risk calculator, we add now genes. And very quickly, then when we add genes to the risk calculator, the accuracy goes to 80%. Now, the genes that we ask, very quickly, there is something called polygenic risk score. To give you an example, for height, then height is very genetic, and bipolar too. But for height, there are more than 1,000 genes that determine how tall are you going to be. More than 1,000. It's not one gene. Then what they do is they add the effect of a gene. It's not exactly adding. It's a little bit more complex, but you add, and you get a score. The higher the score, the higher the probability that you're going to be tall or in the middle or anything. The same is with cardiovascular illness and for some cancers. Then these are the parents. Then you have, for example, a risk score for bipolar depression, schizophrenia, and ADHD. The only specific finding was that the parents with bipolar have high risk for polygenic risk score for bipolar disorder, and this is the control parents. The children, the children exactly the same. It's exactly the same. These are the children. Then it's very specific for bipolar disorder. Even within the parents with bipolar disorder, even unipolar depression didn't have this thing. Now you can put this together, and then you have the parent diagnosis of bipolar disorder, then increase the bipolar polygenic risk score of these parents, that increase the polygenic risk score of the offspring, that increase the diagnosis of bipolar in the children. And all these things are very significant. I'm not only showing significant findings, but there is another pathway that doesn't go through the genes that we can discuss. And the reason for this is because there are genes that are not included here, rare mutations, and actually environment. Now, what now? What we are doing now is that we already know who is at risk to develop bipolar. Then we want treatments to delay, and in the best of the cases, prevent. We want to do prevention of recurrences, management of disorders that come with bipolar, because bipolar doesn't come alone. It can have ADHD, anxiety, etc. Manage the negative consequences of bipolar. We are very worried about the side effects of the medications, and we should. But what about the side effects of the illness? And we are looking for more biological markers, like Dr. Mann was saying, with neuroimaging, but also with genetics. Then again, I thank you, all the families. These families have been with us for 20 years. We thank you for their cooperation. All the clinics, the NIMH, some foundations, and this is our group. Thank you.
Thank you, Boris. So the only thing standing between us and the coffee break is you, but I have one question for you. It was a really striking slide where where you looked at the prevalence of bipolar depending on whether parents have bipolar or not, and it was about 1/3 if they had. What about if both parents had bipolar?
And it's hard to find them. It's hard to find them, but it duplicates the risk. If you have the two parents, the risk to develop bipolar
so 2/3?
Yes.
Wow.
Then But we have to be careful because in our study there were very few parents who both of them were bipolar. It was not very common.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to